Hey, folks, we are here live. I am the Ruthless Wonder, not a Ruthless Wonder, and of course, I'm here with my brother in the struggle of this Streamlife world, this Streamlife WestWorld.
Hey,
Uh,
folks, we are.
Revanchist. Want to thank him for being able to come on today. It's a weird time. I mean, it's 4 o'clock on the East Coast right now, but we wanted to go ahead and get started on talking about WestWorld. Um, Most of you folks know that we already, of course, did the um, previous reviews as an audio. Had some time off from it. A lot of stuff just happening, and so we're back again. We're doing Westworld. This is episode 7. Revengeance, you know how to say the name of this title? Because I don't. I know like Trompe L'Oeil.
Oh, I have no idea. French outside my wheelhouse.
Yeah, same here. So we'll let you guys read the title in in the Streamlight episode title. But it's like I said, it's our episode 7. We are going to get into a lot of the stuff that you guys kind of missed um, from us doing not doing some of the previous episodes. But we want to start, of course, mainly with episode 7 and deal with the crazy things that happen in this episode. But of course, like I said, I am the Ruthless Wonder, and of course, I brought along the Revanchist because who better to do this crazy Westworld than him? Lord knows we do a great job with Game of Thrones with all the craziness going on there. So why not have the man, the myth, the legend back with us? How you doing this afternoon?
Um, all right. I think it's pronounced Trompe L'Oeil, ironically.
Huh? Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we want to, like I said, thank you guys for coming in and all that good stuff. We are enjoying this rather, like I said, rather crazy situation. um, it, let's kind of open up with uh, a quick wrap up of the episode. So, episode 7 um, does a lot. I need to go and actually make sure I have it correct. Was this episode longer than the previous ones?
I don't think so. I think it just sort of felt longer.
Okay, maybe it's because they did tend to almost overstuff this episode, so it felt like we got more than the usual running time, which is about 50 minutes, 50-ish minutes. But it's oh man, um, I I'm literally checking to make sure because I want to make sure I'm right or wrong on this. Uh, oh, and real quick news wise, it did get renewed for a second season. There's some rumors floating around that it might not be back again for 2 years, but I think it's probably going to be closer to more like a year and a half. So uh, we may get a start to the season a little bit later.
I
But
I was gonna say I just checked and it says 1 hour 1 minute like the previous episode does as well.
yeah, I'm looking at the I'm checking the actual runtime minus ads. It's saying 57 minutes. So it technically was about 7 minutes longer, but not that much longer. Just tons happening here. So let's do a quick recap. Teresa meets Charlotte in secret while Charlotte's fucking the the safe robber, um, saying that they're going to steal the data out of the park so that they can get rid of Ford. Um, Teresa's original plan was to try and get it out through that host that went astray earlier that originally was thought was doing Orion's belt, and of course Bernard, who we'll get back to later, like said that's not Orion's belt, um, and of course it crushed its head in with the rock. Charlotte suggests that they stage a demonstration to humiliate Ford, um, using Clementine as a guinea pig. They of course take Clementine while Maeve is right there, and Maeve actually thought that they were coming for her, and so she almost attacks. Um, that of course prompts Maeve to get out again to go see what's going on. Clementine violates her core programming and kills a host that kills a human, we thought, and turned out that was also a host. Um, Bernard takes the full blame for it, and Charlotte fires him. While Ford kind of stands on looking. Um, then we skip over to William and Dolores. They continue traveling with Lawrence by train. Now they're through the dangerous Ghost Nation territory, and they begin to have this romantic attraction that initially William rejects because he's supposed to get married, and it ends up culminating that with them having sex. And what I would say is probably a fairly passionate, very very well shot, um, love making scene. It was interesting that they contrasted the uh, the scene there of them having sex against sort of the normal sex that happens in the park. This was definitely a far more cathartic, loving, like self realization, romantic as we are taught it to be as kids, kind of love making scene, as opposed to the usual ones, which are just wanton sex and nudity for the sake of wanton sex and nudity because HBO. But William, of course, has an epiphany that the park isn't supposed to cater to your base desires, but reveal who you really are. He sees a painting of a canyon that Dolores makes, which she says she saw in a dream. The train is stopped into a great scene where Lawrence trots out the dead body that we saw filled with nitroglycerin earlier and blows it up in front of the Confederates who have a Gatling gun. And you get this magnificent chase scene on horseback. Only only William Lawrence and Dolores survive as the Gatling gun is just taking out people on the back of it's like in the back of a cart being pulled by horse, and the guy's just firing and everybody's going. Uh, in the middle of it, Dolores had fallen off her horse, and William had picked her up to save her. And really, that's probably the only reason why she doesn't die in that moment. Since the park rules, you can't kill a guest, and a Gatling gun would probably have to be coded to just not target the guest at all. When they finally get free, Dolores ends up taking them. Well, they all end up going to the king she saw in her dreams, and she and William leave Lawrence, despite the warning that nobody's returned from going over there, where the canyon is. Uh, Back in Sweetwater, um, that's that whole Maeve conversation where Maeve tries to basically see if she can get Clementine to become self-aware. Um, and she gets out of the park. She threatens Felix and Sylvester into helping her, and not just to see what's going on and to see what happens to Clementine, which they do, but also to get her out of the park for good. And when Sylvester points out that it's a suicide mission, she says, I've died countless times. I'm used to it. How many times have you died? Because if you don't help me, you're going to. So Bernard meets with Teresa again and reveals that he knows about the collusion with the board and the fact that they rigged the demonstration. But he still takes Teresa with him to help investigate Ford because he's suspicious of his motives. They get back to that house that we saw in an earlier episode where it was supposed to be just filled with Ford's like bots made to look like his family. And when he gets there to the cottage, he's explaining to her like the host can't see this place, and that the hosts really do all the surveying, and that's why this place kind of stays off the map. When they get inside the house, Bernard's looking for stuff, uh, and Teresa finds this door, and Bernard says, "What door?" And she still opens it and goes in. We get downstairs to find a secret underground lab, a machine capable of making hosts without anyone's knowledge, as well as several designs, including one that looks a lot like Bernard. And that's when Dr. Ford strolls down the steps like only Anthony Hopkins could and says, No, no, Bernard's a host. And he's been following my orders the whole time. And that Teresa was not the first person to try and take him out of the park. And then he orders Bernard to kill Teresa in the most beautiful fashion. I believe our guest has become weary. To which Bernard takes off his jacket and his tie and walks over and literally bashes her head into a concrete wall. And then puts on his stuff again to leave. And that is juxtaposed against the beginning of the episode where Bernard had been reading to his son a story. Like he's in a dream. He's reading his son the story about Alice in Wonderland. And he wakes up, kind of back into what we thought was his real life. And this kind of pays off both what most people thought after the previous episode, episode 6, but it pays off a lot of the fan theories that have been out there that there are hosts working for the company doing things that we think humans would be doing. So there's our quick wrap up and kind of some leftovers from last week. I want to start with your character impressions, Revanchist. What did you think? Like who's the major standout player for you this week?
For me, I actually liked the character of Hale, the board representative. I don't know what it is about
Uh-huh.
her, but I just like her entire characterization was just pretty awesome. The give no fucks attitude, going to do what she wants, and
Oh, she clearly gives
oh,
fucks,
oh,
just on her terms in her room.
yes, yeah, not
Listen,
literal.
you don't know what it is about her. I know what it is about her. It's Tessa Thompson, and I'm in love with Tessa Thompson.
I mean, that is a very possible
Oh my
conclusion.
god.
Right? Oh god. I
Listen,
also like
folks.
the whole
Folks,
thing, like
you are
the
all out there thinking like Matt, you're being a misogynist. Like, no. Tessa Thompson is an amazing actor, and I'm so glad she's on the show. We didn't talk about her first appearance on the show because we didn't have a review that week. But Tessa Thompson is fucking amazing, and I love that they brought her in to not be. She's not necessarily a bad guy, but she's not necessarily a good guy either. She just doesn't care about people. Um, she said to Teresa, "It's like I like you, like not personally, but for this job, I like you."
yeah, that's why I like her. It's a combination of her reveal and her attitude this episode. It's just so hilarious compared to the way everyone else acts in the show. And not only that, but I also like how he goes into the corporate scheming that's happening, and oh, this company is worth more than you really think. The company cares about letting people play cowboys and Indians, and some massive research project going on, and they're more interested in all the data that's been collected and everything.
Like, and a lot of places that do reviews have talked about this, for the early going. Like, why is a company doing this theme park? Like, it's got to be a loss leader. And I think a lot of people kind of felt like this was going to take the tactic of the Westworld movie, as well as kind of how we all think about Disney World and Disneyland. Like, Disney World and Disneyland make millions of dollars on their own every year. Tens and in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on which one you're talking about. They make that money on their own every year. So people were like, well, it's a theme park. Certain theme parks make money, but no, this is crazily advanced technology that has to be fixed all the time. I mean, if nothing gives you that impression, that whole Ghost Nation chase through the woods, from the train, you have to take this train to an area of the park that no one normally gets to get to unless they find this Easter egg and survive the Confederados. Then on top of that, you have to get through that little dust up, get on the train, ride the train, get to where the Ghost Nation area is, survive the second Confederados attack, and then as the Confederados are chasing you, you have to you get shot up as the Ghost Nation comes in as half cavalry, to kind of save you going forward. Like, that's a lot of money just to do that over and over again every week, basically. That's crazy. So a lot of money had to be put to these things. Like a lot of time and money spent repairing people every day for this thing to keep running through its loop. But I want to get back to that character impression. So you like her character? It's Hale, right? It's Hale or
Yeah,
Charlotte. There we go.
she Charlotte
Charlotte
Hale.
Hale. There we go.
It's just of all the characters, I guess for me she has the strongest impression because she's more or less the newest one.
Yeah.
So the past two episodes have been it's been interesting to get acquainted with her character, whereas I already knew that Ford was kind of a megalomaniacal evil genius, and yeah, I mean, everybody else's characters at this point isn't really too much of an impression because I mean we already know them, but this is the new person, so I guess that's what makes her stand out for me.
No, I can understand that. My major character impression this episode is gonna be a very odd one to say. It's Clementine.
Say, is it Felix? It's Felix, isn't it?
It's it's Felix. Oh, the weakling. No, it's Clementine. One of the things that I really like about what they've done with her character is that she's constantly in her loop. She's got this tragic backstory that they've given her, where she's really just sitting. She's the hooker with the heart of gold. Sending money back to her family. But I like that. You know, despite me knowing basically everything I already needed to know about her, literally like 4 episodes ago, it was a twist. Like using her in this experiment, making you feel for her as they're lobotomizing her. Like I was invested in that. Like as it was happening, it was like, man, I can't. Not her. She's the nice one. Don't do this to. And then they let her put that sadistic face on as she beats the what turns out to be a host's head in. That was quote unquote coded as human, and then like won't comply with commands. Like that's a quickly powerful scene. Like, granted, you guys were tricking the system to do this little display, but man, the way they show it was just gorgeous, just absolutely beautiful. It was just like, no, this is what happens when an uncaring, unthinking, unfeeling being who can't really die now has the ability to understand that they don't have to give a fuck about you. Like it was beautifully done in the same way that they sometimes show Ford as the kindly old man and sometimes show him as the mad god of this TV show. Like it was that kind of characterization done with somebody who you've kind of stepped on this entire show. Like Clementine is not important until this moment, and so that was my really major character impression for this one. But let's talk about the plot points in this episode first, because whoa.
Which one do you want to start with?
Man.
Rob Ford's imminent robot uprising against humanity?
Okay, let's not get to the heavy stuff first. let's start with I think the sort of the easiest one to deal with, and that's William and Dolores traveling with Lawrence. I really kind of feel like this story has the potential to cause all the crazy fan theories out there, and it has since the very beginning. Since he and Logan showed up, it's been a nonstop push to get William to do anything in the park. And when he finally has something to protect in Dolores, he claims to be.
You cut out at when he has somebody to protect in Dolores and then came back at claims to be.
I'm sorry, he really seems to have somebody to protect in Dolores. And and it seems to finally turn him into the white hat he kind of secretly wants to be within himself, and kind of feels like the reality of it, like his awakening into reality is the reality of what his life is, where he has that moment where he's telling Doris like I have a woman at home I'm supposed to marry, and this life I'm supposed to lead, and all this stuff, and he's like, you've revealed to me like who I really am, kind of in this entire journey, and having that moment I thought was really important for the show, because I feel like William could be a very boring character if he goes from kind of asserting himself against Logan to falling in the background with Dolores the rest of the way through. So I feel like they did a really good job with kind of um, keeping him invested in the story and changing something about him. But that, of course, we have to talk about with that this idea that he is the timeline in the past for what creates Ed Harris's Man in Black in the future. So what do you think first, of course, about this person and William, and then what do you think about that crazy future timeline thing?
I think William is an interesting character, particularly I talk about the show with other people, and somebody else pointed out to me that as it's been progressing, like when William first was introduced, his hat was all neat and pristine and white. But as he continues going through and even shows excitement when he has the gunfight and he was exhilarated, but his hat has been getting like progressively dirtier. People have pointed out it's not so white anymore. But then
Yeah.
In terms of the Ed Harris theory, I think there's possibility to it. I think it's also possible that it might be Logan, but I'm leaning more towards William because of things that were said. Like William, the man in black, when speaking to Lawrence, says they're old friends and they fought the Ghost Nation together. Well, in this last episode, they drove the train went through Ghost Nation territory, and there's also the fact that between the two scenes where Lawrence is killed by the man in black, his hair is like completely cut short. But when Lawrence is found in another scene by basically, he's found shortly after he dies, and his hair is actually no longer the same length as it was freaking when the man in black found him. Like his hair had,
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what it is, but his hair had gotten shorter in one of them, and he's like, "Oh, it's El Lazo," and then it turns out, oh, El Lazo's actually just Lawrence. And he says, "My friends call me Lawrence," is what he says to William when they get on the train. It was that my friends call me Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the whole thing where it's just the theory that I read after last episode is that he became the man in black because what he's doing with Dolores happened 30 years ago, and they were trying to find the maze, and the man in black is obsessed with trying to find the maze, and that basically they think that whatever happened 30 years ago, it failed, and now he's, desperately attempting to follow that path to get back to the maze, and why he's been showing up every year for 30 years. And yeah.
No, and it also gives us a lot of credence to this idea that um, the reason that you don't see certain characters in the William and Logan story
Yeah. Oh, one
is because
second.
they didn't exist yet.
Yeah, that's what it is. When he aims out the train with his rifle, Lawrence's hair is long. But when you last saw him with the man in black, Lawrence's hair was like cut really short.
Yeah,
The other thing
and
is,
that
is
seems weird to
like,
do
yeah,
as a repair to him.
yeah, and like I pointed out to you the one day when we were talking about it, when Maeve is watching the commercial, you see Clementine and a different madam for the Mariposa in the commercial, and then you see Maeve in her past life as the prairie girl with her kid. Well, when William and Logan got off the train, the two that they saw was Clementine and that other madam.
That's true. Yeah.
And it would also incidentally explain the man in black's obsession with Dolores if the man in black is actually just, yeah, William.
It
Oh,
also
and
makes
someone
that.
else also pointed out that looking at them, the man in black and William both have blue eyes.
Yeah, it also does a very interesting thing to that first meeting with Teddy, the Man in Black, and Dolores, because that's right after they had instituted this whole reverie thing, which means to some degree she might have remembered him.
Yeah.
And she, uh, even though she's doing what her loop says to do, which is of course scream and kick and fight and all that, we only saw that from Teddy's perspective. We don't know what happened after the Teddy robot dies there, because it may be, you know, he was just kind of having his like, Dolores is the one last time I'll, we'll have our moment and then move on, because he doesn't, feel the same way as Ed Harris as he does as William, if they're the same person. But I want to kind of get to that other, the exo story, as I like to call it. This whole Bernard, Teresa, Hale, and Ford thing. This board, okay, I'm gonna call it out right now. I think that the reason why we are dealing with this exo story about what goes on about making Westworld the way we are is because you need to see in context what happens when people fuck with Ford and how they got to the position they're in. Because you pointed it out when we talked previously that um, there's no mention of the takeover from William and Logan by any of the Exo Story characters, and you would think that to a certain degree they'd be looking out for it, which means it probably already happened. So really, this whole testing of Ford is because they want the technology that Ford has been doing on his own for the last 30 years, and what they thought that they purchased, which means that Logan could still be alive as well. And you know, while Hale and the family of Teresa, yeah, here's my kind of slightly crazy theory that the family that Teresa came with is actually Logan's family. Yeah.
I think that actually kind of goes in line with something I had read the other day, in that they never actually state what company it is that William and Logan work for, only that their
Exactly.
company was contemplating buying out the park. Likewise, in the past, you hear Ford talking about how it was like before Delios got involved. And the running theory now is that William and Logan actually are, Delios. They work for Delios, and that's Logan's company and Logan's father's company, or whatever it was.
Hmm.
Also, something like, we know how William is as a character, but then you get that brief moment in the Man in Black storyline where someone comes up to him and basically interrupts him, saying that his foundation saved his sister's life, and the guy told him, "I'm on my fucking vacation, leave me alone." Revealing that even though he's kind of like this crazy evil guy inside of the park, he's actually apparently a decent person in reality, and it could be that all this time coming to the park, he now just views it as a video game. Basically, he just doesn't care.
Yeah. It really seems to me, at least, it really seems like that's the case here. The other thing that really got me kind of mm, on that overall idea was the way that situation at the agave farm went down between Teresa and Ford. Um, they like I'm not saying that necessarily that's directly Logan's daughter, but she seemed to at least have her like the way Ford talked to her and the way Hale talks to her. It seems like she wasn't the person that they necessarily wanted to give this job to, but she's there. And you know, law of conservation of actors, it makes more sense to have her have some personal relation to the park, and that's why she got to go to this place that seemingly no one else gets to go to, um, because it isn't otherwise mentioned by guests as a potential story. Not even that family that we see really early on. I can't remember if that's episode 1 or 2. Uh, but seemingly, you know, that family didn't get to go out there, and none of the none of the current hosts were out there working either. So I have to think that at some level she's got some other part to play, which of course brings us into kind of the entirety of the season arc here. I really think like this season's going to end either with a reveal of a robot that we didn't expect, reveal of a host that we didn't expect, or the death of Ford. And yeah, I know that's kind of half season arc, half crazy plot theory. But the reason I thought of it is, what are you going to do in the last episode? Like the robots have to rise up, and who's in control of all the robots? Ford.
I think that
Um,
kind of also plays into the WestWorld franchise as a whole, because I mean there is Beyond WestWorld, where the entire plot was a television show based on an evil genius an evil scientist who was basically trying to take over the world with his Delios robots.
exactly. But I feel like his replacement bots and yeah, we'll I mean, there's not too much to talk about the season arc at this point, other than that we know what's leading up, and these last episodes have either got to be a full robot uprising that we find out happened in the past and is going to happen again in the future, or somebody's going to die who's important, or be revealed as a host who's important. Um, and so I really kind of feel like, yeah, like Ford, it makes sense for Ford to suddenly end up being a host. We know he's never left the area of the park the entire time it's been open. Um, we know he's exceptional at making other hosts, and that's one of the things that we talk about with really all sci-fi when it comes to uh, not just robots but into artificial intelligence. That when we reach the singularity, where the thing we create can create better versions of itself than we can, it will exponentially grow from there. That Ford might be the singularity. Certainly to a degree, Bernard is. I don't know. Tell me what your thoughts are on that. This idea that like Bernard makes robots. Like Bernard makes hosts. Bernard controls the behavior of these hosts. Like Bernard is literally the singularity.
Well, I mean, that was also a theme in the original Westworld. We talked about this the last time we talked. In that, in the original Westworld, they said that when they were questioning about whether or not the hosts could do something unexpected, the guy had said that they don't even actually know what's going in there because we have robots that are partially designed by other robots.
Yeah. And it turns out they're not just partially designed, they are fully designed
Yeah.
by a robot.
I'm trying to remember what it was again. Oh yeah,
It was security guy.
that's
The security
that's
guy
what it
did it.
was. Yeah, the chief supervisor was the one who said they aren't dealing with ordinary machines. These are highly complicated pieces of equipment, almost as complicated as living organisms, and in some cases they've been designed by other computers. We don't know exactly how they work. And I think it was a nice throwback this episode to that, where Bernard told Teresa that 50% of the code was built by Arnold and we don't know how any of it works. We don't actually know how it works.
Yeah. And that gets to this deeper issue of if Bernard is just a copy of Arnold, who's to say he's not really like in the same way that Ford could easily be a host made by Ford? Who's to say that half of Bernard's consciousness is not literally just stuff Arnold put in to download his consciousness? I know it sounds a lot like the movie Transcendence, but here it's very relevant. I This idea that Bernard could literally be half of Arnold, like his personality type, the way he thinks about things is entirely based on the recordings and videos and all the other things that Bernard had ever said, and all of his his writings and all these things. Legitimately, this could essentially be what reality is. Like Bernard could literally be Arnold. Um, as well. We got a quick question from Maurice Russell. Shout out to him and his podcast. So, do you think they will they will reveal another person who's actually a host? Absolutely. Now, or even if you disagree with me, it's all on you. But I think that we're going to get at least one more, if not two or three more. Like I know Teresa's going to come back as a host because that's clearly what Ford was doing in that basement. That's why he brought her down there. He's been sizing her up from the beginning. It's like, huh, you do a little thing with your little. There's a little muscle there that ticks when you get angry. Didn't notice that. And like Bernard, anything Bernard knows, now Ford knows. So of course Teresa's going to be as perfect as possible because Bernard's been fucking Teresa for at least as long as the show's been on. Um,
I, I personally think that everybody there is a host besides Ford. Possibly not Ford. Ford might even be a host made by Ford, but I think they're all hosts because there's that dialogue early in the show when he tells Teresa that Arnold and everybody was Arnold was worried about the getting the corporation involved and the board members, and then Ford basically says something along the lines of, "You're all just our guests here," which is, again, if you go back to the terminology of the hosts and the guests, like it sort of implies that nobody working there is actually a human. It's all under Ford's control, and he pretty much says so in this episode. Like, I control everything here, and I think that was more or less a subtle nod to the fact that the entire Delio staff is actually hosts.
I don't know if they've all been replaced, but like, yeah, I think the park staff might also be entirely taken over. Except for that does make me wonder what happened to Bernard's assistant.
I honestly think that the entire park staff is our hosts, even Elsie and like everybody that we've seen working in the park who live in the park. They don't ever leave the park. I think they're all hosts. I think the only one that wasn't a host is people who come from the outside. Like Hale might be a host, might not be a
Oh,
host, and I think Teresa was not a host, but might come back as a host.
well, since we're here now, Charlotte Hale is definitely a host. Yeah, like I'm not even entertaining things otherwise on this. Like, she might not get revealed to be a host for 4 seasons, but she's definitely a host, and that's because it doesn't make sense for the corporation to send in a real living human being into all of this, knowing that one, somebody could realize what she's doing and hold her hostage. They could force her to make a new decision, based on, you know, appealing to her humanity. And she, generally speaking, doesn't give a shit about people. Like, it's not just that she doesn't give a shit about the host, because obviously, she's fucking, Cervantes, the bank robber there. But she doesn't give a shit about people in the park, because she fires Jeffrey Wright like, all right, so you're fired. Like, oh, not you. Like, I'm not saying that Charlotte Hale isn't a human somewhere, but the Charlotte Hale in the park is definitely a host. Because what better? She probably has that satellite uplink in her, so she can automatically send the information that she gets back to everybody else. She clearly can move. Like, she's probably coded human. That's where they got the idea for doing that from. Like, she's a host made by somebody else, and the question is who that somebody else is.
I have actually a different theory regarding Charlotte Hale and her being presently a host, because when Ford is talking to Teresa in that scene at the agave farm, she tells him that the board is sending a representative, and he says they are already here. I think possibly if we're going to see Teresa come back as a host, I think it is entirely probable that Ford has already had Hale killed and reproduced her as a host.
Well, yeah, because it only takes him 2 days to make. According to Bernard, who we have to kind of trust here, it only takes 2 days to make a host with the machinery that Ford has. So it's
Since
easily possible.
nobody outside would be able to tell the difference between Teresa host and Hale host, he can continue to assert it, he can continue to do what he wants in the park if he takes his two enemies, turns them into hosts, and they freaking subdue the board for him.
Yeah.
There is another interesting thing going back to the theory of Arnold being Bernard that I didn't notice that a friend of mine actually just pointed out to me, is that Ford uses the same line that we saw quote unquote Bernard using to Dolores, that mistakes are only the tool of evolution. Mistake is the only tool of evolution.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that they both used that line.
Oh, and Maurice popped in with another one. Do you think the board would send a host to take control of the park, knowing how well versed Ford is in controlling and recognizing them? Actually, yes, I think that would happen because she doesn't really have many interactions with Ford until that moment. So they know that all they have to do is send her in there. Ford will recognize that it's a host and not really take action physically against the Hale bot. because there's nothing for the Halebot to threaten him with other than overseeing things and knowing that the board can immediately know what's going on. Like that's the threat to Ford is that the information gets out. Well, this bot is going around getting to see everything, and even though she's not getting to see how the coding works or anything like that, she's getting the most up to date information so fast that not even Ford could stop it from getting out. That's my thought on that. But I do want to address one thing I did see pop up before we get into the good and bad performances. I do want to address this whole idea of Hale being in on it with Ford because of the whole blood sacrifice line. No, it was just showing that like Ford can turn on the host at any point to listen in, to look in if he wants on anyone at any time. That's that Ford controls everything, thought process that for some reason she must have thought like was not the case. I do want to get to this one crazy theory though. Not just the Ford is clearly like doing some crazy stuff, but that the maze. All right, that Westworld is essentially the Matrix. Everyone inside Westworld thinks that they're a human or a host. Excuse me, a human or a host, yeah, a guest or a host, but really all of them are one or the other. Everyone inside of Westworld is a host, including Ford, just like in the Matrix, because the Matrix was actually just all meant for the computers. But anyway, um, this notion that because all of these people are hosts, that this uprising is a plan by Ford to not just take over um, Demios, I think is how you say the name of the company, but to expand beyond. And here's my reason for that. When you have them go down to cold storage and we find Ford down there with a robot, the robot bartender from way back in the day, the Gen 1 robot bartender, you see them go through what looks to be an earlier version of the park. And in some of the past episodes as well, we also see that we see that that sort of feel that inside the admin building look seems to have some of the old imagery that we saw guests being greeted with. I don't know if you noticed that, Raven. Did you see that?
Yeah.
So whenever anyone is going into the older parts of the park, it's because they're going into what happened when the robots actually did try and take everything, probably just prior to the Demios buy-in. Um, I think that they're showing this for a reason, and that's what's going to become the next iteration of the park. I don't think that the future seasons are going to necessarily just focus on Westworld. I think we're going to get the future world. I think we're going to get the other things in there that we want. But I think that the impetus for it is this whole Ford doing a new narrative that takes up so much of the park. Um, and I think that every time that the board quote tests him, he does something grand, and this is his grand response to the board testing him. That he is manufacturing now in the future another massive, seemingly host uprising that's going to cause them to need to spend more money just to control everything than it is to let them take from him. My big theory is that, like I said, this robot uprising is what's going to give us the future world. It's going to give us maybe not necessarily Roman world, but it's going to give us some of these different worlds that we saw in the sequel as well as the TV series. But what's your big grandiose plot theory for the show?
Oh, I don't actually. So far, my big theory about everything is that one, Bernard is a host of Arnold. We know Bernard now is a host, but we don't know if he's actually Arnold, though evidence seems to weigh heavily towards that. And that basically what we're seeing with Dolores and William and Logan is in the past where the behind the scenes said that the park suffered a critical failure 30 years ago. And what I think that is that that's when like the hosts rose up, and I think Dolores is basically going to end up leading a robot rebellion, and we're going to see it happen again in the show because she's retracing her steps due to code that Arnold had left behind. And I think it's kind of like a ghost in the machine, because then you have that scene where Hughes is like, there's also changes being made by someone named Arnold. And I think Arnold actually uploaded enough of his consciousness somehow into this park that he still exerts control over the hosts. And that basically because when Ford talks to Dolores, he says that Arnold tried to, and they both basically, Ford and Dolores, confirmed that Arnold and Dolores were intending to destroy the park.
Yeah. The other thing I'm really interested in is, what if Arnold's not real?
That is interesting, but I'm
Roll,
uncertain.
roll with me here. Arnold, the in the code Arnold, is essentially the devil, right? Or Prometheus, whichever way you want to go with it. And in order to keep complete control, you couldn't just have benevolent but ultimately domineering God Ford. You would have to have somebody who could be his antagonist. And Arnold makes the perfect antagonist. The idea that Arnold's not real means that Ford is literally both, and he gets to play devil to, to God when he wants to keep things in line. Oh man, the history of the maze is something that's been written in these cultures for thousands of years. Okay, that sounds like some Arnold shit. Uh, well, I have control over everything, and Elvis Park belongs to me. Okay, that's some Ford shit. So how do I keep people? How do I keep humans in line who might find sympathy for these robots? Well, I use Arnold. How do I keep hosts in line that get out of hand? Well, I use Ford. And Ford, he's not crazy. He's realized that the real challenge is keeping everything maintained. And so he took Arnold, his friend who died, who helped him make the park, and said this lie of he's in the code, and he did half the coding when Ford really did all the coding, and Arnold was really like the conceptual guy. He was the one thinking of like how you could have, like, he's the narrative focus. Ford does not seem to be too focused on narrative. We haven't really seen him do a lot of narrative stuff. He seems to be more about the technology end of things. It seems like Arnold would then be the narrative guy who reveals things through these huge stories. So you could kill him and keep going, but you also would get an ability to control the humans outside the park by saying, "Well, no, Arnold wrote like most of this code. I didn't write most of the code, so we got to keep doing things the way that Arnold did, and I'm holding on to that information because if that ever gets out, everybody's going to know." And he's using Arnold as his control sphere. Like, yo, I'm the good guy here. Of course, Arnold's the bad guy. He's making the robots rebel. What do you think?
I think that theory is a little too out there for me to sign on to. I do think I think Arnold is real. I think it's interesting because in the first episode, you have that line from Ford when he's talking to Bernard about the mistake, and he said, "Mistake is the only tool of evolution. A mistake is the only tool of evolution." If you also believe that what we see with Bernard and his conversations with Dolores are actually happening in the past, and it's actually Arnold talking to Dolores, he has the line, "Evolution forged the entirety of sentient life on this planet using only one tool, the mistake."
Mm-hmm.
So if that was Arnold talking to Dolores in the past, and in episode 1 we have Ford saying the same thing, it just lends itself to the theory that Arnold had to have existed as a person.
See, but I'm not saying that Arnold didn't exist. I'm saying Arnold was never human.
I don't think Arnold was never human.
That Arnold was Ford's first creation, essentially. See what I mean?
Uh,
I know it's crazy. It's out there. But that's
Yeah,
my
I'm
thought
still
process.
not going to sign on to that one.
You're like, Matt, that's too crazy. I'm like, I know. It's bonkers. What,
I mean,
imagine.
it doesn't really line up to when you look at how the other earlier hosts that we've seen are. They're not that intricate. The only one who is sophisticated enough are the ones that they've made upgrades to, like Dolores and Ford's family. The other ones are that we see, like the guy that Ford goes and has a drink with, are all like not that complicated.
Right, but that's the breakthrough. Like Ford. All right, here's the timeline in my head. Ford makes Arnold, right? And initial Arnold is not up to snuff. And we keep seeing Ford making all those adjustments in the flashbacks. We saw him making all these adjustments to the different robots, things of that nature. And his big breakthrough is not the bartender, it's Arnold. And so for 3 years after he makes Arnold, before they even get the park thing going, for 3 years after he makes Arnold, he refines Arnold. He gets Arnold to the point of this amazing, point where Arnold can do a lot of the stuff he's doing. And it's Arnold's ability to build on what Ford gave him that creates the quote unquote code that does all this. Now, of course, Ford has access to all this information, and that's why, like I said, the code belongs to him. But Arnold is the one who does that initial thing. And when Dolores, who is made by the two of them, the bicameral mind, get it? Um, who is the first project of Arnold and Ford working together. Um, when Dolores and Arnold have their uprising, it is quote unquote Arnold, the robot, saying, "No, I will not be ruled by you, human." It's a true rising up by the two of them, and it's because Ford realized that Arnold was kind of getting out of hand, and he buries him deep into the park inside the maze. That's where they're going right now. They are going to find Arnold, and that's where the first uprising starts. And Ford ends up winning because Ford outsmarts the robot by being the one who made the robot. Um, and that's what leads us to the present, and we go from there. It could be true. I'm not asking you people to side with me here. I'm just telling you, like Arnold was made by Ford, and Arnold wasn't really human. Um, so let's get on to the standout good performance. Who are you giving your standout good performance to this week?
Uh, Anthony Hopkins. I just loved that scene at the end with Teresa. Like,
Oh my god, it was
classic
amazing.
Anthony Hopkins evil genius.
I wanted
I
him
was
to
like,
like eat the side of her face right there. I was like,
I,
oh my god,
I was just waiting
Hannibal
for
Lecter is here.
I was just waiting for the I'm gonna pair your liver with a fine Chianti.
Well, and that's the thing that got me. Like, it was not the Hannibal movie, Anthony Hopkins. It was not Red Dragon, Anthony Hopkins, where I feel like he turned Hannibal, or the directors turned Hannibal Lecter into this like superhero serial killer. Uh, but it was old school Silence of the Lambs. I'm going to fuck your mind and then eat you. Like it was that beautiful moment for me.
Yes.
I got to see the actor that I like mimic as a villain in life right there. I was like, yes, but he's not my standout good performance. Nope.
No, who's yours?
Jeffrey Wright is Bernard.
No.
Listen to me, people. Like you start this episode like about to cry because of him having to, like, you're getting to see him with his son like in the hospital knowing the kid's about to die. Like, and he gives you all that emotion. Then you see him fired for something that is not his fault. You know that Ford did the reveries. You know that all this stuff is on Ford. But he good soldiers it and takes the fucking, falls on the damn sword. And then despite all that, he says, all right, I'm gonna tell Teresa everything that happened. Because I need to make sure that Teresa, at least can fight what's going on, because I think something's wrong with Ford. So he brings her in. You think like, all right, great. These are the good guys. Ford's the bad guy. Like we finally have some real conflict going. And then he gets her downstairs. They make the big reveal of like Ford's been hiding all this equipment. And then you find out not only is he a host, now he has to murder this woman that you've just seen him be in love with the whole time because he's a host and she's a guest, and our guest has become weary. Like, hell yes! Hell yes! Great performance. Jeffrey Wright's amazing. I need to meet him in real life. Like that's how important this was. So give me your standout bad performance.
Just gonna go ahead and give it to the guy who plays Felix. I don't like his character at all.
It's not that I dislike Felix. I just fucking like he can't act to me. Like I feel like he fucks up too often.
Exactly. I'd feel more invested in the character if he didn't do such a bad job being that character.
Yeah, because I feel like Felix could do a lot of good stuff. My standout bad performance, however, is going to go to Lawrence. For some reason, Lawrence felt very stiff to me this episode. Like I really like that actor, and I've enjoyed him in other stuff. And I felt like his performance as Lawrence this time was just it was too stilted. And it's whereas he's been very flowing, very realistic, very charming. I felt like this time he was just it was like he was suddenly a Gen 1 with the servos going. I didn't feel like he was truly doing it right. Um, but next week we see that there's going to be even more crazy shit going on. We're not going to spoil it this time because we're gonna do a full wrap up of this season after the season's over and talk about all the different things that we like from it. But we're also going to do like a catch up episode here probably just before episode 10, after episode 9. So we'll get to we won't do too much spoiling the future here right now. So let's give it your final rating. Go ahead, you first.
My final rating, I give it a 5. It's an amazing show. If you have not watched it yet, you need to do so. Watch the show. Anthony Hopkins is amazing.
Okay, I can't give it a 5. The reason I can't
Then
give it a 5 is
I have to disagree with you and plot your murder now.
as people know, our ratings are 1, skip it; 2, watch it; 3, show it to your friends; 4, post on social media; and 5, show it to people who haven't picked it up. Now, here's the reason why I can't give it a 5. I don't want people seeing this episode with no concept of what's happened before, because this is one of those episodes where like it's amazingly well done. But the reason it's amazing is because you know all the stuff going into it. This is not the pick up
Oh,
and watch here episode.
well,
This is a 4 for me.
if it's not the entire series, then yes, just the episode. I would have to give it a 4 as well because you have to watch the entire show. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no. WestWorld is a 5 for me, absolutely. But this episode, I got to go 4 because major shit happened this episode, and there's no way I want you to experience that without seeing the previous stuff. Even if you just watch episode 6 before you watch this, like too much stuff happens that need in. You've got to jump into this before this episode. You can't jump in on this one. But I want to thank our guest in the chat, Maurice Russell. I want to, of course, thank everybody who's watching this after the fact on VOD, via YouTube. Be sure to check us out live. We'll usually do these on Tuesdays, but sometimes we might do these on Mondays. Just depends on our schedules. Look out for season 8 after we get season 8, episode 8 after episode 8 finishes up. But we love you guys. Like I said, we will see you all next time for Revanchist and myself, the Ruthless Wonder, not a Ruthless Wonder. We will see you all next time, and thank you for listening to our recap of WestWorld, Season 1, Episode 7, the title I can't pronounce in French. Bye-bye.